been a while since we heard that at the beginning of a video, but I'm feeling really good. Today is a big day. You could finally order the BetterSax Jazz Cut Reeds, and to celebrate, I've made this video with all of my best reed tips from years of practicing, studying with masters, and lots of trial and error. If you've got any additional tips that don't get covered in this video, please share them in the comments. Tip number 1, soft reeds are okay. When we first start out playing, we're given a soft reed, like a 2, hopefully, to make playing the saxophone and getting those first sounds a lot easier. As we progress, we gradually move up in reed strength, first to a 2.5, then perhaps to a 3 or even 3.5. It's logical to get the impression that more advanced players play on harder reeds and beginners play on softer reeds, but that is not at all true. The great Michael Brecker once told me that he played on number 2 strength reeds. Many of the world's greatest saxophone players play on soft reeds. I find that a lot of people can really benefit from going to softer reeds. I myself used to play much harder reeds, but when you go to a softer strength, you don't need to put as much pressure from the lower jaw on the reed, which reduces the tendency to bite and pinch off the sound. It also just makes playing a lot easier. So don't be afraid to try softer reeds out. If it was okay for Michael Brecker, it's fine for us. Tip number 2 is to soak your reeds in water. Our reeds need to be wet in order to work properly. Yes, you can just pop a reed in your mouth, but it is much more effective and hydrating to soak them in a cup of water for a couple minutes. You could also wet multiple reeds at the same time this way. At a certain point, your reeds will get waterlogged if you soak them for several hours. I find that this has a negative impact on how they play, so avoid soaking them for too long. This brings us to tip number 3, which is to wet the back of your reeds as well. We want the entire reed to get wet. Eventually, since reeds are full of holes like tiny straws, the water will make its way up there. But it's a lot faster to just flip the reed over in the cup of water or even in your mouth. The bonus to doing this is that you now have a moist surface to help make a better seal with the mouthpiece table. Which brings us to tip number 4, which is to get a good seal between your reed and mouthpiece. With your well-hydrated reed, you can spread a bit of that moisture onto the mouthpiece table, which creates a sort of adhesive which will help hold your reed in place as well as provide a more airtight seal. Real quick, I want to tell you a bit more about these BetterSax Jazz Cut Reeds we've just released. This is a project I've been working on for years. There's lots of really good cane reeds out there, so it's not very easy to improve on them and offer something that is actually unique and different. So it took a long time, but we got there in the end, and the final results have really exceeded my expectations. First and foremost, they play amazingly. And like with mouthpieces, I prefer a design that feels at home in lots of different styles. We call these jazz cut reeds, but that's a very broad term, meaning these reeds are going to sound great for all different types of popular music styles where you want a nice balance between low, medium, and high frequencies across the full range of the saxophone. This is a proprietary cut, which means you won't find this reed profile in any other box of reeds. It is truly a unique and new design, not just new packaging. Speaking of packaging, the main reason I wanted to develop my own ideal reed was so that I could play great reeds every day and never again have to waste these stupid single-use plastic cases. It is insanity that people in 2023 are still packaging reeds in these things. We are literally throwing tens of millions of these in the garbage every year. Some companies are doubling down on this, wrapping their reeds in even more single-use plastic. BetterSax reeds come in cardboard sleeves that are in cardboard boxes. So yes, I am publicly calling out all reed manufacturers who are still forcing their customers to waste all of this plastic. And on behalf of all saxophone players, I'm asking you to please stop. I think it's time for the saxophone community to insist that we end this single-use plastic reed case once and for all. If your favorite brand of reeds is still using plastic in their packaging, you can send them a message asking them to stop, and in the meantime, you can buy reeds that don't use plastic until they change. Our BetterSax Jazz Cut Reeds come from French cane growing in the south of France near where I happen to live, and we developed them with Marca, a family-owned business that has been making reeds for multiple generations here. They have some really high-tech and innovative methods which allowed us to get the precision and consistency we were looking for. Extra added bonus, these reeds are certified organically sourced cane. It's another win for the planet, and hopefully that's the direction more reed manufacturers are going to go in. I put a link in the description to where you can order these reeds, which are currently available for alto and tenor saxophone. I hope you'll try them out and then let me know how they work out for you. I personally have been loving them. Let's get back to the reed tips now, shall we? Tip number 5 is take your time lining up the reed on the mouthpiece. Make sure you have good light and take however much time is necessary to get your reed perfectly lined up and centered. I use the rails as my visual reference point. You want an equal amount of rail showing on each side underneath the reed. You also want to line the reed up with the tip of the mouthpiece as precisely as possible. A crooked reed will not vibrate optimally and will be prone to squeaks. Tip number 6 is to take your time putting the ligature on. Don't just throw the reed and ligature on in a rush. It takes time to get these things perfectly lined up, and that time is worth it. Your ligature is designed to be centered on the reed and the mouthpiece. If it's too far forward or back, it can have an adverse effect on reed performance. Tip number 7, learn to adjust your reeds. This tool right here, the Geeklet, literally changed everything for me when it comes to reeds. It is so easy to use and make every reed play significantly better that learning a few simple adjustments makes playing the saxophone so much easier and more enjoyable. I have other videos on exactly how to use this, but real quick, just flattening and smoothing out the table of each reed before each playing session takes seconds is oddly satisfying, and once you try it, you'll never go back. It's also very easy to balance each reed wing so that they vibrate more evenly, giving you an instant boost in resonance, control, and ease of play. This is one of the most important accessories you can get for your saxophone. Trust me, you'll be glad you did. Tip number 8. Another adjustment you could do on your reeds when they get too soft is to clip the tip off. This is a reed clipping tool made by my friends at Marca. It's considered by many to be the best reed clipping tool available, and they make them today on the same exact machinery that they used several decades ago. This machine dates back to 1901. Clipping the tip of the reed can extend its life a bit, but this technique can also be used to make a reed that plays too soft play a bit harder. I know a great saxophone player who buys the hardest strength reeds he can find, then takes the clipper and clips them to make them even harder. That kind of goes against tip number 1, but always do what works for you. Tip number 9 is to adjust the reed tip placement on the mouthpiece. It is best to keep your reed lined up with the tip of the mouthpiece and put it in the same position every time you play. However, you can influence how a reed plays by moving it up or down in relation to the tip of the mouthpiece. To get a reed to play as though it were a bit harder, move it up ever so slightly. Moving the reed down on the tip will make it play as though it were a bit softer. Tip number 10 is to seal the surface of your reeds. If you look at the heel of a reed, you can see that it is made up of lots of tiny tubes. It is, after all, a big piece of grass, and these tubes are bringing the water up from the roots to the leaves when it was growing. Flattening the table of your reed with a tool like the Geeklet takes care of that part, and you will feel how smooth and even it becomes. The vamp of the reed can benefit from sealing those pores as well. So here's another use of the Geeklet. Take the handle and gently rub it back and forth along the vamp here. It will smooth out that part of the reed and seal up those pores, protecting the inside of the reed from our saliva, somewhat extending its life. Tip number 11 is how to straighten out a really warped reed. If you don't wet an already used reed enough, you will get something that looks like this and plays really bad. Usually, soaking a reed long enough will get it to return to its normal shape, but If you don't have time to wait for it to soak properly, a quick hack is to place the warped reed on the table of your mouthpiece like this and flex it back and forth a bit. Larger reeds like tenor and baritone take longer to hydrate, so you may need to use this trick on occasions where you just have to get the horn out quick and start playing right away. Since reeds are all made of wood, there's always going to be some level of warpage going on when they're getting wet and drying out and getting wet again. That's why using the geeklet to flatten out the table of your reeds has such an impact on how well they play. Tip number 12 is to use a reed case. This is another absolutely essential accessory every saxophone player needs. When you're done playing, you want to take the reed off the mouthpiece and put it away in a good reed case. This protects it from damage, keeps it flat, reducing warpage, and will hold some of the humidity in the reed for a time. You want a reed case to have some holes in it so that air flows. Tip number 13 is to rotate your reeds. A good reed case will have slots for several reeds. We have these really nice magnetic wooden cases for sale over at BetterSax.com if you want one like this. It's good practice to have a selection of reeds in rotation, soak each one of them in water daily, and play on them for a bit. This way you have a variety of reeds to choose from for different situations. Like you might have a really good reed that you want to save for a performance, so by soaking it a little bit every day, it never completely dries out, and by playing on it just a little bit every day, it doesn't wear out. Other reeds might be a bit on the hard side and need to be broken in, so playing on them for 10-15 minutes a day are going to get them broken in nicely. Still, other reeds might be on the soft side but still play well. Those are perfect for those long practice sessions where you don't want your embouchure to tire out. Tip number 14 is to mark your reeds with a pencil. If you've got multiple reeds going at once, you really should keep track of which is which. The easiest way is with a simple pencil. I find that it's easier to write against the grain than with the grain. And your bonus tip number 15 is avoid moldy reeds. For years, my reeds were always moldy and I never knew why. And then one day I discovered by accident that if I left my reed case out in the open air, the reeds didn't develop the mold, or at least not very much. Reed cases have these holes in them for airflow, but if you seal your reed case in an airtight saxophone case, it becomes a perfect environment for mold to grow. So if you don't like moldy reeds, try storing your reed case in an outer pocket of your saxophone case if you have one, or somewhere else outside the case. This did the trick for me. Use the link in the description to learn more about the new BetterSax Jazz Cut Reeds. I am so happy with how these came out after all the development work, and I recommend you go watch this video next. It'll teach you more about how to get the best results from your saxophone gear.